Sleepwalker stories. Sleepwalkers have been known to execute a variety of tasks, from preparing a midnight snack to making phone calls, all the while deeply asleep. Sleepwalking affects 1 in 10 people at least once in their lives.
The sleepwalker who drove 10 miles and killed his in-law. Kenneth Parks, a 23-year-old Toronto man with a wife and infant daughter, was suffering from severe insomnia caused by joblessness and gambling debts. Early in the morning of May 23, 1987, he awoke, got in his car, and drove 23 kilometers to his in-law's home. He stabbed to death his mother-in-law, whom he loved, and who had once referred to him as a gentle giant. Parks also assaulted his father-in-law, who survived the attack. He then drove to the police and said, "I think I have killed some people. My hands," only then realizing he had severely cut his own hands. Under police arrest, he was taken to the hospital, where he underwent repair of several flexor tendons of both hands. Because he could not remember anything about the murder and assault, had no motive for the crime whatsoever, and did have a history of sleepwalking, his team of defense experts, psychiatrists, a psychologist, a neurologist, and a sleep specialist, concluded Ken Parks was asleep when he committed the crime, and therefore unaware of his actions.
The sleepwalker who froze to death. In January 2009, Timothy Brueggemann, a 51-year-old electrician from Wisconsin, sleepwalked out of his home in Hayward wearing only his underwear and a fleece shirt. His body was found the next morning about 190 yards from his rural home. With temperatures around minus 16 degrees Fahrenheit, Brueggemann died of hypothermia. Investigators found a bottle of Ambien in his bedroom. Ambien is the most prescribed sleeping pill in the country and has been linked to hundreds of cases of sleepwalking. Sanofi Aventis, which produces the drug, insists Ambien is safe when taken as directed and not mixed with alcohol or other drugs. But a friend of the victim, Ed Lesniak, admitted that his friend, who was plagued with insomnia, sometimes drank when taking the sleep aid. This wasn't Brueggemann's first dangerous sleepwalking incident. Last summer, he drove his pickup truck into the side of his own garage. Brueggemann's mother had advised him to stop taking Ambien after the incident.
James Currens. James Currens has been a sleepwalker for a long time, but his most terrifying adventure occurred when he was 77. In 1998, Currens got up and sleepwalked out of his house, cane in hand, and right into a nearby pond. At this point, he woke up chest deep in water, but was unable to get out as he had become stuck in the mud. This alone would be terrifying enough for a 77-year-old. But what made the incident really frightening was that he found himself surrounded by alligators. He used his cane to keep them at bay and began shouting for help. One of his neighbors heard him yelling and called the police. Using lights to scare off the alligators, the police managed to free Currens, who escaped with only small cuts from falling when entering the pond.
Sleepwalker found snoozing on crane. A teenage girl was rescued after being found fast asleep on the arm of a crane 130 feet above the ground, police have confirmed. A passerby spotted the sleepwalker curled up on top of a concrete counterweight and called emergency services. The girl, 15, who has not been identified, apparently walked out of her home in Dulwich, southeast London, climbed up the crane, and walked across a narrow beam, all in her sleep. Police and fire crews originally thought the girl was going to throw herself off the crane, but when a firefighter crawled out across the arm towards her, he discovered she was asleep. He was scared to wake her in case she panicked and fell off the arm. It is believed he then called her parents from her mobile phone at the top of the crane, who then phoned to wake her up. The rescue operation took 2.5 hours, and the girl was finally brought down in a hydraulic lift at 4 a.m. She was taken to the hospital for a checkup, but was sent home without any sign of injuries. The incident took place in the early hours of Saturday, June 25th, but the police have only just revealed what happened. A spokeswoman said, "Police were called at 1:30 a.m. on June 25th to reports of a woman up a crane in Underhill Road, Dulwich. There were no arrests, and the woman told officers she had been sleepwalking."
Sleepwalking teen fell from the balcony. A 7-year-old boy who fell from a second-floor balcony while sleepwalking survived the ordeal and astounded doctors by returning to his feet 2 days later. Adam Poole, from George Green near Slough, was on holiday with his family in Greece when he stepped off a balcony 35 feet from the ground. Nikki Poole. We ran to the balcony and looked over. His mother, Nikki Poole, told she was awoken in the early hours of the morning by the child's crying. She ran to the balcony and looked down. There was his pitiful little body all crumbled up at the bottom, she said. Mrs. Poole said her son had climbed onto a chair, which was on the balcony, and stepped off it in his sleep. The Pooles rushed Adam to the hospital, where he was treated for slight internal bleeding and bruising. Mrs. Poole said doctors had told her Adam must have been asleep when he hit the ground because his body had been in a relaxed state. Earlier that day, 2 weeks ago, Adam had been on a cruise around the Greek island of Rhodes. He is unable to remember anything about the accident, but when his mother asked him where he thought he was at the time, he said he thought he was still on the ship.
California v. Wrights. Stephen Wrights killed his lover, Ava Weinfertner, a married woman in her 40s, during what was supposed to be a romantic Catalina Island getaway in 2001. He smashed her head with a flower pot, leaving shards in her scalp, dislocated her arm, punctured her with a plastic fork, fractured her wrist, ribs, jaw, facial bones, and skull, and, wielding a pocket knife, left 3 gaping stab wounds on the back of her neck. Wrights told police that he had no recollection of the attack, though through flashbacks, he recalled believing that he was in a scuffle with a male intruder. Wrights, who had worked as a commercial fisherman, told police that the knife wounds on Weinfertner's neck were nearly identical to those that fishermen used to kill sharks. At trial, his parents testified that he had been a sleepwalker since childhood. The jurors didn't buy it. They convicted Wrights of first-degree murder in 2004. Their decision was presumably influenced by the defendant's history of violence towards Weinfertner, including an incident in which he had broken into her apartment with a knife and told her that he would gut someone like a fish.
Fane versus Commonwealth. This classic case in the 1870s involved a man who fell asleep in the lobby of a Kentucky hotel. When a porter shook him to try to rouse him, the man drew a gun and shot the porter 3 times. While the porter held him on the floor, the man repeatedly yelled, "Ho-wee!" He reportedly rose, left the room, and told a witness that he'd shot someone. When told who it was, the man conveyed sadness. The shooter was found guilty of manslaughter, but the conviction was reversed on appeal. Evidence that he had a lifelong history of sleepwalking and that he'd been sleep-deprived before the attack was excluded from the first trial.
Woman dreams of Korean soldiers attacking her home, kills daughter. On August 11, 1950, Ivy Congdon of Carnegie, Australia, murdered her daughter in a state of somnambulism. Congdon had a long history of acting out her nightmares in her sleep, as in one instance in which, after learning a local resident was breeding red spiders for sale as pets, dreamt of spiders attacking her daughter, and so went about brushing at her daughter's body to rid her of the animals. However, after learning that her daughter might become a transport driver, in the event Korea attacked Australia, Congdon dreamt of Korean soldiers attacking her house. To defend her home, Congdon counterattacked the soldiers with an axe, only to discover, to her utter horror, that she had killed her own daughter in the process. The courts believed Congdon's tale and set her free. Stories of sleep disorders can be funny and harmless, as well as vice versa. DarkSide wishes you a really good and calm night. Like and share this video. See you in the comments. Remember, everything has a dark side to it, and you're never alone in the darkness.